Welcome, everybody. My name's Doug Stone, and I'm the president of the Louisiana Association for Jazz Educators. And I also am happy to be involved with the Louisiana Music Education Association, and very happy to kind of be co hosting this 12 for 12 panel discussion with my good buddy and inspiration as I kind of do my thing here in Louisiana, Lee Hicks. Lee, I'll let you introduce yourself and maybe where you're teaching and what your role is in LMEA and that before we get going. You want to go ahead and do that for us?
Sure. My name is Lee Hicks. I'm the band director at Fontainebleau High School in Mandeville, Louisiana. I'm the jazz division chairman for Louisiana Music Educators Association. Um, and, and one of the roles that we have with LMEA Jazz Division and with LAJE as pretty much partners in developing jazz is trying to expand the horizons and open up minds to new things. And that's why we're here tonight. So I'm looking forward to hearing all these wonderful gentlemen and their programs and how they brought that to their students and what kind of things it's done to influence their students and their programs. So looking forward to this. This is going to be fantastic.
Great. Thanks, Lee. So I have had the opportunity throughout my career to live in some different places and to work with some different people and to be involved in education in different levels. And of course, as a student, and I've even had some kind of, interactions as I was a student with a couple of these gentlemen here that we have on the panel. And as a public, I've taught in community music school environments. I've taught in private lesson environments. I've taught as kind of a consultant or a outside teacher in high schools. I've taught community high school big bands. I've taught at lots of different camps and things. But for 6 years, I would say probably the main focus of my teaching career was my 6 years as a middle school and high school band director in Rochester, New York at the School of the Arts. And in that role, like Lee talked about, Lee and I are jazz guys and we do jazz. But also in that role, there was some other things that all of us have to do, as band directors. It wasn't necessarily all just teaching jazz all day long. And it's been very important for me to be flexible and to learn and improve in other areas and things kind of maybe outside of my comfort zone. And as I've done that, I've been able to use those things to help students. Currently, of course, I have a really nice job as an assistant professor of jazz studies at Louisiana State University. And so I can really, in that capacity, in that role, focus on helping students develop as jazz musicians, which is kind of what I do. However, I also teach a couple of classes that are outside the jazz area, even at LSU, and I've been fortunate to develop some of those skills to do that. And we're hoping tonight through this panel discussion mostly just to inspire people to think about other opportunities, other ways to teach, other things that they could incorporate in their programs. And, you can do these on a big scale, like, I'm especially thinking of Mark here and his program at East Rochester. But there's other ways to do these things. And so it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It could just be something that you kind of dip your toe in. I think the order of our discussion tonight, I'm going to start with Jose and kind of set up my relationship with him and how our teaching is actually kind of dovetailed. And then I'm going to ask him some questions about some of the things that he's done with high school students, with middle school students, and I think we're going to find some of that very interesting. Then I'll move over to Mark, and he can talk about his Celtic music program, which is, I think, kind of at the place where it's a nationally known thing, or maybe even broader than that, what he's doing there. And he's done these kind of presentations and talks in a lot of different places. And then I want to bring in Liam. because I had the fortunate opportunity of kind of doing some tours with Liam where we were able to see some steel band programs in schools, colleges, and high schools and other levels. And it was great to see Liam interact with those folks. And also, I spent some time with him at the Percussive Arts Society International Convention a couple of times, and he took me around as a saxophone player at a percussion convention and introduced me to folks that are doing steel band at a high level, not just like Liam does at Northern Illinois University, because it's another kind of internationally recognized program. However, I think if you look at universities throughout the country, there's not a ton of steel bands. And so I want Liam also to kind of talk about what he's done in his role there and how that program has grown. So we're going to jump in, and then hopefully at the end we'll have some themes here. And Lee's going to be taking copious notes over there, I think, to pull all this together and draw some themes out of what these three gentlemen have done, and maybe have some follow-up questions and kind of do some brain picking as well, in ways that can maybe benefit teachers in the state of Louisiana and beyond. So I first knew of Jose through a camp that we both worked at in Wisconsin, the Birch Creek jazz camps that we've done there. And then I ended up at the Eastman School of Music as a student, getting my master's degree. And during the time I was there working on that, Jose was doing a couple of things in Rochester, New York. He was teaching at the School of the Arts, where I eventually taught after he left. And he was also, when I started there, was teaching a pretty heavy load of classes and students at the Eastman Community Music School. And then during my second year at Eastman, he became the jazz saxophone teacher at the Eastman School of Music. So he had a lot going on there, and he was actually able to, at the time, I needed some work, and he was really able to hook me up with pretty much all of his community music school students as he moved on to teaching at the Eastman School. And that was great, of course, for my teaching, and it was also great for my pocketbook. And then eventually Jose moved on to become, I believe currently is the director of jazz studies at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. And so he left. So I jumped into Jose's shoes at the community music school. Then he moved on, and I jumped into his shoes as a band director and jazz band director at the School of the Arts. So basically, I owe my hundreds of thousands of dollars of my income to things that Jose kind of greased the skids, and I just got to roll with them. Within all of those great things that Jose has done and is still doing, what I want to dig into today is the work he did at the Eastman Community Music School with the jazz combos at Eastman at the Community Music School, what we would refer to as jazz combos. At those schools, they're called jazz performance workshops. So there's some, kind of the study and work in the classroom is important, as well as the performance part of this. So Jose, at some point while he was working at the community music school, started a Latin jazz performance workshop. And there is really not a lot of music beyond the classical and straight ahead jazz spectrum at the Eastman School or at the Community Music School. So Jose was really a groundbreaker in terms of doing that. Now, he has an amazing background in playing Latin music and Latin jazz, and every time I would meet someone who knew that music and knew that culture, they would say, Jose, but they called him Chiguito, I believe. He had a little nickname that they used. And then I started kind of checking out recordings and things that he'd been involved in. And as a professional touring Latin musician, Jose is quite well known. He's what we refer to in the jazz world as a heavy. And so it was great to get to understand that about him. But of course, that made him a real expert in terms of teaching students Latin jazz. When he left to go to Lawrence, I did my best to kind of take over that group and keep it going. My Latin jazz experience basically comes from a group that Liam and I played together in called Panoramic, and we played enough of that music to help me understand clave and some grooves and how to kind of get kids started and adults too at the community music school. But of course, I tried to outsource as much as I could because I needed some help. But fortunately, there's a lot of great Latin musicians in Rochester. So, Jose, why don't you take maybe 10 to 15 minutes and talk a little bit about, you can kind of go any direction with this. You can talk about yourself a little bit and what you've done in your experiences, but I'd love to hear about your work in terms of the Latin Jazz Performance Workshop at the Eastman Community Music School, even the Latin Jazz stuff you're doing at Lawrence, and how, talk about your way of making that happen, but also maybe talking to somebody like me, who's a teacher who is interested in this, but could maybe be a little intimidated and not an expert per se, okay? And I'm going to try to shut up and let you go, but if I have questions, I'll be jumping right in there. So, Jose
Absolutely.
Encarnacion.
For having me here. I am so honored to be here. So, Doc, thank you for the invitation to be in this great panel. I'm just, so excited to kind of, share what I have been doing with this music. Number one, why I did it is because it was actually requested by the students. When I was teaching at School of the Arts, one of the things that I like to do is not only to, play, jazz music for them, but all different kinds of music. And I remember presenting, in one of my rehearsals, Latin music to the students, and they just loved it. They love the music. And, I say if we want to, really bring all these different kind of musics to the students, we have to do what, I remember I actually wanted to be a marine biologist. That's what I wanted to be until somebody played Dexter Gordon for me. And I was like, oh man, wait, I'm going to go in that direction, right? I was, engaged into, what kind of music is that? What musician is that? So I like to do that first. I like the music to get to the students first, right? So I did anyway. I did that for the students of School of the Arts, and a lot of them got interested. So I took one semester just to work on Latin music, and I was lucky enough that one of my favorite musicians, Michael Mosman, who writes, charts, music, amazing trumpet player that I met at the Tri-C Jazz Festival years ago in the 90s. He was playing with Ray Barreto. I was playing with another group from Puerto Rico. He was coming to New York to do one of the jazz conventions in Rochester. So he actually came to School of the Arts. I prepared his music, and then we went and did the convention. It was amazing. Well, a lot of those students wanted to continue doing that, and that was my opportunity through the Eastman Community Music School to open that ensemble. So a lot of the students, started going. There were those that were interested in playing Latin music. So I talked to Howard Potter, and he was like, yes, let's do it. Why? Number one is bringing diversity, is bringing inclusion from the community. Students are learning a complete different, musical language. So it was really good for the institution and for the whole community. And nothing of that was happening in terms of, ensembles at Eastman. So I started it there. Basically, the other thing that I did, that I'm going to go back, then I once I got the ensemble together, then I started it kind of not only teaching the music, but also the history of the music. So I took one or two rehearsals just to talk about the history of the music. Where is it coming from? It's coming from Africa, and then to Cuba, right, and then New York, and then from there to the world, right? So, and I took a lot of time. before we started today, I heard somebody saying, man, it just takes so much time. Yes, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of your own time to learn the music. Another thing that, if you're a music educator, for Latin jazz, one of the things that I also did is that I started uh, learning how to play, congas and bongos and timbales and montunos on piano, right? All these different kind of, basic skills that you want to teach the students, right? And then the other thing, it was trying to connect with the local musicians, right? So for example, I used to play and record with the Antonetti family. Freddie Colon was one of my guys there, and I will send a lot of my students to him so he can, work with them in terms of, conga patterns or bongos. What is the roles in the bongos, right? Or the timbales. Bass players go and work with these, Hector, right? Great bass player in Rochester, New York. So I think that, it's very important that we look around and say, okay, here's a teacher here. This is a community, work, and then piano players go and learn montunos here. But at the same time, I was doing the research to learn about these basic skills. So I think that that's very important if you're going to be, teaching this music. And hey, and then the other thing also is, trying to look for something that is going to be, is going to keep the students engaged too, so at the end of the academic year, we'll go and we'll perform at the International Rochester Jazz Festival. And that's something that the adults and the students look for, like, oh man, we're going to be performing, at the jazz festival. So that really make them, engage into the music and learn, about the music. So I did that for 6 years, and it was incredible. Just, I always had a full rhythm section, piano, bass, congas, bongos, timbales, sometimes a drummer, and then horns. It's challenging also because there's no repertoire, right, written for, this kind of every semester the ensemble will change. So I was doing the arranging, I was writing music, so that's another thing that if you're thinking on, okay, I'm gonna create this ensemble, you're gonna be also, writing music for the ensemble. I did a similar thing at Lawrence. Now I'm at Lawrence University. And I used the same process. The late Fred Sturm, he wanted me to do a kind of a clinic on Latin music. So he put together 2 big bands. It was huge. And I went and I played the music first again, and then I talked about, the history of the music. All of a sudden I had 3 students, 3 percussionists came and knocked on my door, and they were like, hey, we really want to, get into this music. And I was like, man, that would be amazing. So what I did is that I created a tutorial. It was a 1 unit or 1 credit class. We met once a week, and we started there. We started playing. They wanted to learn more rumba from Cuba. So started there. We started, working with rumba, and then Dane Richardson, which is the percussion professor at Lawrence. He is amazing, and he's been in Ghana, he's been in Cuba, he's been in Brazil. So he started sending students abroad. So a couple of students went to Cuba. They learned the whole bata, oro seco, right? They came back. So now we get something more going on. Then I started, because for me, I think that it's important that we really understand what's going on, at least in the rhythm section, and it's like everything, right? If you're teaching jazz, so you want to know what's the function of the hi-hat, right? And what's happening here and there, right? So it's the same thing. So I actually started, learning the bata tradition. So I learned okonkolo, and I learned the itotele. I'm still in that process. It's a very complicated, process. But then I brought all this information to a new ensemble from 3 students. Then all of a sudden we had a new ensemble that we call Tambo Toque. And then after, we created an ensemble, we did a recording, we sent it to Downbeat, and they won one of those, Downbeat awards, which, is not about winning awards, but it's good that the students get recognized for their work. And they did an amazing job. After that, then I took some of those students and music, and then we created the Latin Jazz Ensemble. And then what I do is that every other year, then I take 1 term. We go by terms, so we have 3 terms a year. I take the spring term, and then we concentrate on Latin music. So we have been doing that for the last, I don't know, wow, 10 years, I will say. And then I also again, I took 1 year off actually just to learn a little bit more about Brazilian music because I love that music. And it was okay, I need to do something with these too, And I took 1 year to do research. And I went and I started, checking out candomblé music and Ketu songs. And so I think that's a very important part of, trying to get into these non-traditional ensembles is to really know the music, really do a lot of listening, do a lot of research. Another thing that I recommend also teachers to do is to bring guest artists to. One of the guest artists that we used to bring every year was Michael Spyro. He used to teach at Indiana University. He's retired. I think he's back in California, but he is amazing. And if you're looking not only for Cuban music, I mean, he's like everything. He's just incredible. He used to come and then he will do master classes on how to play bata, how to play Latin music, how to play Brazilian, how to play samba, how to play, everything. And that really helped, the students. And I went to all those workshops. Why? Because if I was going to be teaching those classes, I'll be learning and then taking notes and listening to the music that he was bringing, right? And so I think that that's another very important aspect, right? Just bringing a guest artist, boom, that is going to work with your students, that is going to expand the knowledge, not only of, the students, but yourself as well. So I know that we have a lot of other people in the panel and I don't want to take all the time, so.
That was perfect. That was a perfect amount of time. And there's so many different things to pull out of that. I think that as people watch this, everyone should feel free to slow down, go back, fast forward, take notes. The things that struck me the most that I just would like to bring out before we move on to Mark here is using the resources of local and other musicians to come in and work with your ensembles. And we live in Louisiana. I mean, this is kind of obviously focused partially towards Louisiana educators. They're if you're close to New Orleans, anywhere, I mean, really anywhere in the state, New Orleans people are willing to come and work with your kids. If I think about where Brett is, more in kind of a place where there's this Cajun music tradition, people are going to be willing to come in to work with your students. Give them a little taste, and they'll be happy to do it. And then, of course, if you can get things on larger scales, that's even better. Michael Spyro will come in if you got what he needs, he will come in and work with your kids. Like Jose will come in and work with your kids, and then a thing I think that's really important is I go around and work with educators in different situations. I think it's easy for educators to feel like they need to know everything, and it can be hard when guests or clinicians come in and say, "Oh, try this, think about this." And it really takes that humility that you have demonstrated and what you've talked about to put yourself in the position of, I need to hang on every word this person says, and I need to try to figure out how to make that become part of me and then use it with my students. So, guest
What?
artists and humility. Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. Thank you, Doc. I mean, this is so beautiful. Another thing that I did also, you want to give also your students that sense of accomplishment, right, and that they're doing something also, great for the program, right? So the students that go study in Cuba, or they go to Brazil, or they go to Ghana, right? When they come back, then I made them co-directors of the concert. And I give them responsibility also, like, okay, you're gonna work with these songs, you're gonna put this together, you have to do all this, and then they get this, um, 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 responsibility, right? To work with the music, to work on what they're learning. This sense of ownership, like man, this is so great. I mean, I want to spend a whole summer in Cuba, and then I'm working with the music, and that's so beautiful too. So I relate a lot on that. It's okay. And then not only that, but I learn from them. Like, hey, could you teach me this new song that you like to learn? You know, and that's beautiful too, because then I'm just learning from from everybody, right? So yeah, it's really great. It's, I mean, for that Brazilian concert, I didn't know absolutely nothing, and I said, I'm going to start from the beginning, man. What is samba? How do you play the samba? Where is the surdo? And who is going to play the cuica? How you play the cuica, right? But I wouldn't be able to do all that, right, if I don't bring some people that are going to help me, create that. And again, it's a community. And when you do that, then you meet other people. Say, oh man, you play the quick up, that's, and then you can bring him to work with you on the students and play a concert. And, it's great. So thank you.
Uh, Doug, I'd like to throw in
Yes,
two
please.
things that as an educator in public schools these days that I'm really keyed in on is when Jose said why he did it, because it was requested by the students. And then he was talking about keeping the students engaged and working towards a performance and doing things. I mean, that's what we need to keep kids involved in music programs and to build music programs. The more we can accomplish those two things. And I have a feeling with our other gentlemen that are about to share their stories, we're probably going to hear a lot of the same ideas about that. Student engagement is one of the biggest things we need to look at in all of our programs. So I'm looking forward to the next gentleman, Jose. That was fantastic.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Lee.
You so much. Honor again to be here. Thank you.
Okay, now Mark, I think our connection is less, probably runs slightly less deep than my connection with Jose. So I don't think I have a 10-minute story to tell about our connection, other than the fact that my wife worked with you in East Rochester. Maybe go ahead and introduce yourself, but yeah, just kind of dive into, what your program is. Maybe explain it. I don't know if you had a video. I know I got back to you late today on that, but just
Sure.
give us the rundown, my friend.
Yeah, I can show a little bit of a video if you want. So, to give a little backstory, I mean, first before I even get into any of this, I also want to say, as Jose did, what an honor it is to be here. I saw the other names on the email when you reached out to us, and I read it 3 times to make sure that I was supposed to be on that email. So it's terrific to be a part of this panel. The thing that I took away from, I mean, everything Jose just said, is the fact that Jose wasn't born knowing everything there was to know about Latin music. I just assumed, Jose and I haven't met before on this screen tonight, but I know the name, I've heard the music, and to know that you went out and learned this stuff is incredible to me. So, it makes me feel like I'm on the right track. So, my backstory is this. It was, I think it was 1999, or maybe just into 2000. It was, I think, my 4th year of teaching, and I was completely burned out. And, as happens when you're a music teacher, and luckily I've recovered from being burned out a couple of times, but but I was really burned out, and I had not only stopped enjoying teaching music, I'd stopped playing music. I was just like, I'd leave school and I'd go home, and that was it. And somebody who, to this, like, this is the most momentous moment, most momentous thing that's happened in my career to me, and I don't remember who it was. Somebody gave me a CD of a new Irish band called Lunasa, and I, like a lot of Irish, or like a lot of Americans, I had sort of a passing acquaintance with Irish music. And I knew it to recognize it if it, like, was St. Patrick's Day. I'd hear the tweedling and the deedling and whatever, and it was fine. I didn't pay any attention to it. I heard the CD, and it was just the from the first note was the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And it is this combination, for those of you, if you listen to Irish music today, it sounds very different than Irish music sounded even 30 years ago. And it's because there's been so much influence from other types of music, specifically from jazz. And I don't know that a lot of Irish musicians talk about that. They talk about other Irish bands that influenced them, but really it's a lot of jazz. It's jazz rhythms and jazz bass lines, and the melodies remain the same. In most instances, the melodies will remain the same, but you've got a rhythm section behind it, and it's truly a jazz rhythm section. And the sorts of things that are being played are the sorts of things that you would hear in Latin jazz or in lesson swing, but especially in like bebop, because the longer I've spent playing and teaching Irish music, the more I figured out how many similarities there are to jazz. We in jazz, we play with this, it's not straight. You see it on the page. Of course, what's written on the page is not how it sounds, but you see it on the page and it looks very straight, but it's just very slightly not. It's dabba 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 da dabba 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 da. And you play this and you spend enough time with, and you go, wait a second, I'm playing bebop is what I'm doing here. I'm playing bebop that is very diatonic and sticks inside a very specific part of the scale. But so for me, I heard this music going back more than 20 years now, and I immediately, I'm a trumpet player and a drummer, and I didn't touch those things at all. I picked up the Irish flute I had bought for my wife because she's a flute player, and I started playing the Irish flute and just listening to it and figuring it out. And it was probably like 4 years before I went to a workshop with a great Irish flute player, and turned out, luckily, that I'd been doing it correctly. But it could have completely gone the other way. But I was so inspired by this music that I wanted to immediately share it with my kids. And so I went to school and talked to the kids. At that point, I was teaching in Baltimore in a middle school, and I was teaching both bands and orchestras, and had a jazz band, and said, I've got this crazy idea. I want to play Irish music. What do you think? And we had it was a big school, to be clear, but we had 30 kids in this first group. And I would write out all of the melodies. I had this idea that I was going to write out all the melodies, and then they would learn to play the melodies, and then I'd go back and teach them how to play the ornaments. And of course, it was completely wrong. I also had this idea that learning tunes by ear, like all the Irish musicians, was a huge waste of time. And I was going to bring my real knowledge. I mean, I'd been to music school. I was going to bring my real band knowledge, and I was going to fix Irish music so that people knew how to teach it. Of course, everybody already knows the punchline. I was completely wrong. Luckily, I never went out and made a huge fool of myself before I figured out that I was completely wrong. But I did, when I started at East Rochester 20 years ago, in the fall of 2001, I started another Irish music group there, and I took all of the mistake. Well, I took most of the mistakes. I fixed, not all, but I fixed most of the mistakes I'd done the first round, and started teaching by ear, and started teaching the ornamentation and the style and the flow of the music right from the get-go. Now, I'm not a control freak, but I am a control enthusiast then and now. And so I would create these very carefully scripted orchestrations of what every kid in the group was supposed to play. And we would have, in the group, we'd have, 1 or 2 fiddle players and 2 or 3 flute players and a couple of whistle players and a couple of guitarists and a bass player and a percussionist or something. And I would write out everybody's part. And we had this moment, this one day, where our bass player, I still to this day don't remember if she read the music double speed or half speed, but whichever it was, she was off by 50%. And our guitarist, who I continuously butted heads with, although of course now have a wonderful relationship with, he was mad at me that day. And his like passive aggressive way of dealing with his anger toward me was, I'm not going to play the stupid chords he wrote. I'm going to play the chords I want to play, and I'm going to make it up as we go. And we played this tune, and it was, I know it's completely historically inaccurate and all that, but if you've ever seen the Glenn Miller story with Jimmy Stewart, and he spends the whole movie trying to find the sound, we had these two things happen, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, that was it. That was the sound we were looking for. And it was when the kids had ownership of it that this magic happened. And so that was probably 2003, and was a real turning point in the group. So from that point on, I tried to, and I continue to try to, as much as possible, to let the kids take ownership of the group. So we still learn all of the tunes by ear. But once we, as we're learning the tunes, we'll start out with however many kids we have in the group, which is depending on what year it is, and sort of, I kind of think of it as generations of the group, because the kids, stick in it for a number of years. But, there's usually somewhere between 6 and 18 kids in the group. And we'll start out learning a tune by ear, and everybody learns the tune. Everybody learns kind of what it's supposed to sound like. And I'll play it for them, and we'll listen to some recordings of it, and we'll learn it. And it'll usually take us a couple of times together, a couple of rehearsals together, before they really have a grasp of a brand new tune, especially the newer kids. As we start to speed it up, a couple of, amazing things happen. Like the kids who can't keep up have to find something else to do. And the kids who can keep up either become the lead players, or they start devising like really great counter melodies and things like that. And so it's the kids who create the arrangements. Now, as I say this, and it sounds like this amazing thing, first of all, this was built over a long period of time. But the other thing is that I don't always do it like that. We right now, this coming school year, I'm going to have a very new group, and there's going to be a lot of hand holding, and there's going to be sheet music out on music stands, and there's going to be all these, there's going to be sort of crutches that are going to allow us to get to where we want to be. But the kids, what we do, what we do in the group, I used to think was unique, because like we're playing this particular kind of music from this particular place in the world. But I think now the thing that's more unique about it, and more, I feel more special about the group, is how we do what we do and how we create the music, and the fact that the kids do that. We did 2 years ago in 2019, I graduated a class of kids who had, it was 2/3 of the group graduated on the same day. And they had been, because our district is all in one building. We had kids who had been in the group from as few as 4 to as many as 8 years in this group, and had really grown up in this group. And so we recorded and we released an album at the end of 2019 that was, I mean, it's entirely traditional Irish music, or traditional Irish music. I mean, when we say traditional Irish music, it's both a style and the fact that, like, we don't know who the composer is, but sometimes we do know who the composer is. But all the melodies were these traditional melodies, but all of the arrangements were created by the kids. And so all the harmonies, all the bass lines, all that stuff was created by the kids. And it has led to, for the kids in this group, has led to, I think, a really deep understanding of just of musical concepts, of harmony and of bass lines and all these sorts of things. And all of these kids, not coincidentally, all the kids in this group are also in the jazz bands. And in Irish music, we do use improvisation, but it is not creating whole new music. It's not spontaneous composition. It's variation. It's how are you going to take this melody that thousands of people already know and make it your own, this repetition through. And so that, to kind of come full circle, because I started off by talking about some connections with jazz. That idea of variation and improvisation within that music, that idea of getting kids really understanding harmony, really understanding how a chord progression works, really understanding, like, okay, I hear this melody, what's a cool bass line that can go with that, has not only led to this group being successful, but has transformed our jazz program, and it's transformed our band program, because our kids are able to hear things at an entirely different level. And I don't know who's watching, and I don't know, if I'm preaching to the choir here, but the electronic tuner almost never comes out in our classroom anymore, because kids just know how to listen. Kids understand how music is supposed to sound. They understand the bass line. They understand the function of a scale step within the melody. All these different things, from really just experimenting. And it really is, Jose talked a lot about doing what the kids want to do, and that's crucial to it. And the thing I want to add to that is making sure that kids feel freedom to experiment in what they're doing, whether it's in jazz, whether it's in Irish music, whatever it's in, saying, okay, we're playing this melody. I want you to now take your instrument and make up something completely different. Here's our key. Here's the 3 chords we're going to be using, not telling you when, and go. And, without fail, the first 20 times they fall on their face, but again, that 21st time, then the magic happens. And then the group as a whole starts building that. And then we really sort of have this logical, sort of natural evolution of a set of tunes. You know, we'll play 2 or 3 or 4 tunes in a set, and it just sort of becomes an arrangement in this very organic kind of way. So
Awesome.
I think that's it.
Mark,
Yeah.
there's so much of what you said. Part of me was like, okay, I can't really do any better at emphasizing any of these things. If anybody listens to this and wants to know why this was so amazing, everything you just said, just contact me directly. But, you know, we go back to the, you know, a personal interest in the music and kind of almost an obsession with it, which I know Jose has, and I know Mark has, and I know Liam has too, all of us. Then the humility of, hey, I want to get better at this. And, you know, I also say that these improvising, learn things by ear type ensembles, if you're trying to teach with the national standards, those ensembles cover, you know, 75% of the national standards for music education in one rehearsal, day in and day out. Great way to justify your program to administrators. And I also do think that there is a real benefit to being a control freak or a control enthusiast, because when you have the kids in the classroom, they know the procedures, they know the policies, they know the way their behavior and attitude needs to look. Then that's when you can say, try stuff musically. The music is where the freedom lies, you know? So I encourage for teachers the need to have that classroom management thing together like a big bad control freak. And that's when you can be loose with the improvising and trying new things. I think that I can just see that in you. And also, of course, I personally love the transition of, oh, I know if I write all these things down, it's going to be great. And it just never works that way, man.
Nope.
So I don't know, Lee, if you have any follow up, and then we can go on to Liam. Okay.
I love that it was saying, you know, we're going back to the kids taking ownership and the kids being a big part of it. And that's what, that alone keeps them engaged in what you're doing, you know, because they want to be there. They want to do that. And we need more of that in schools, kids wanting to be there. Kids need our programs of the arts and music, and the way our programs run, I believe, isn't always the way we think it should sometimes. Sometimes the kids will take us in new directions that we may not see. And sometimes I think it's a good thing to step back and look at what you're doing through the kids' eyes and find out what they want. This is going great, Doug.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, gentlemen.
Doug, can I
Yes.
add? I don't want to like monopolize the show
You're
tonight,
great.
but can
Great.
if I can add one more thing, just that is, when I started at East Rochester High School, there were 20 kids in the high school band, and the program bottomed out. Like all those 20 kids were all upperclassmen. And the program bottomed out to a point where we had 10 kids in the high school band and 6 kids in the high school jazz band. And first of all, pre-COVID, a year ago, we had in grades 6, 7, and 8, 70 kids in jazz bands. But when we bottomed out with 6 kids, the stuff I just talked about doing with Irish music is the approach I took with jazz band. It's just that instead of doing Irish music, we were listening to brass bands. We were listening to New Orleans jazz. We were listening to cool Quilla jazz and other, you know, jazz styles and other musical styles from Africa. You know, we were listening to all this stuff and transcribing it and then arranging it ourselves. And I want to point that out because, you know, who knows how many people are watching this, but I don't want anybody who is coming out of a COVID year, you know, losing, I don't know what things are like down there, but, you know, coming out of COVID and, you know, losing 70% of your kids and saying, well, I can't teach Irish music. No, but you can do what you know how to do in a different way. And actually in a way that is more authentic for the kids.
I'll say, you're bringing up brass band and New Orleans music. We're in Louisiana here. So it's literally down the street. Yeah. So there are, and you know, in my jazz program, I think one of the things that really helped my groups in the past few years is that I have so many kids that are doing brass band stuff on their own. They have their own gigs. One of the groups just got a gig. They're playing at the Jazz Fest. You know, they're going off on their own and doing it, and that's what them doing those things is what brings them back to our programs, and it actually encourages the other kids to get more involved too. So definitely, and what you're saying with the different types of groups and what's going on around the country, it may be something different. If people from out of state or look around the country are watching this, this could be something totally different for you. But whatever is going on in your neighborhood, like in the Lafayette area, what Brett was talking about earlier, Lafayette area, they have the Cajun music and the Zydeco, and they're starting to see groups like that come out of there. And, you know, all around the world, you'll find different places, different styles that might mean something to your area and the kids in your schools that'll bring them involved into your programs.
Yeah. Love it. Liam, thank you so much for being patient. And I have learned so much, you know, in being associated with Liam. And I remember being in Trinidad and, you know, hearing these pan groups and the way that they learn music and play music is, you know, comes from such a deep place, and you can feel it. You can just feel it. I mean, I wouldn't say I've had, you know, a ton of things that felt like spiritual experiences with music. You know, I'm a little too analytical to feel that way most of the time, but it was hearing those bands when we were in Trinidad that really was one place that I can reference of feeling that way. So Liam, I think there would be a number of things maybe you could touch on, and I bet you probably have a few ideas of what direction you want to go in. So I'm going to pepper you with maybe like 3 things, but you just take this wherever you'd want to. I think it's interesting to think about how the program at NIU came about, because it was a unique thing, I think, at the time, probably still is to a certain degree. And you have taken that on. So you, kind of like me riding on Jose's coattails there, you've been able to continue building, you know, what Cliff and Al started. I also think there would be something to be said for just talking about how the music is learned traditionally in the culture as well, and maybe ways of relating that to what we do in our traditional American programs. But you can also talk about whatever the heck you want. So Liam, feel free to introduce yourself a little bit and just go from there.
Thanks, Doug. It's really nice to be here, everyone. So my name is Liam Teague. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, the Southern Caribbean. And I moved to the US when I was about 19 years old. I'm 47 now, so a long time ago. And the instrument that I play, many people know it by the name the steel drum. It's actually the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, and there and elsewhere in the Caribbean, it's referred to as the steel pan or pan. For many folks, if they are at all familiar with the steel pan, they've heard it play this type of thing. You know, from The Little Mermaid, Under the Sea type of thing. And while that's all well and good, the pioneers of this instrument really always wanted to highlight the versatility of the steel pan. These instruments are considered to be the youngest family of acoustic instruments to be invented in the 20th century. So compared to, let's say, the violin or the piano, they're babies. They came into existence in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And like many countries that were colonized, the ruling class, the British, try to suppress indigenous forms of expression. And so long story short, when you need to express yourself, you will find a way. And so local Trinidadians eventually created this instrument. It was primarily born through the genius of young Black Trinidadians, most of whom had no formal musical training. So it's really amazing what they were able to accomplish in a relatively short space of time. What I try to do is to follow their mantra in showing the different musical possibilities of this instrument. So whether it's Calypso music, which is one of the national musics of Trinidad and Tobago, or maybe Brazilian choro, maybe some tico tico. Or we do the music of the great Charlie Parker, maybe a little Donna Lee. Maybe some train. Or even ragtime music. Classical music, if you want a little Mozart. Maybe some Paganini. And so that's part and parcel of what we do here at the NIU Steel Band. Our repertoire is very eclectic, and that really comes out of my Trinidadian experience. For the pioneers of this instrument, they always felt like they needed to prove themselves. So it wasn't enough for them to be able to play the folk music, the indigenous music of Trinidad and Tobago, Calypso music. They felt they needed to prove themselves by playing music from Europe. So it was very common, and it still is very common, to hear steel bands playing classical music. And when, as my daughter likes to say, in the olden days, most of the steel pan players were rote musicians, R-O-T-E. So their way of learning would have been by imitation. So the master steel pan player would go into the pan yard, which is where most steel pan players would gather to learn, and he'd play a musical phrase. And the other players would either look at the hand patterns or just listen and try and imitate that, or sometimes a combination of both. Now, to be honest with everyone, this is something I actually took for granted until I came to the US. And I remember taking my first oral skills class, and for the first semester or so, I wasn't having any problems, and I couldn't figure out why, because I was thinking, I've never done this before. Why am I not having any issues recognizing these pitches? And then I remembered, wait a minute, I've been doing this practically all my life in Trinidad and Tobago, except that we don't call it oral skills. That's just how we learn, In my experience, I was somewhat unique in that I started as a rote musician, but I also learned to read and write music relatively around the same time. So as a result, I've been able to get into various musical avenues, whether it's playing with jazz combos or as a soloist with symphony orchestras. And I really try to preach, the benefits of both systems, and, I have students that come here, many of them from the Caribbean, and many of them may not necessarily be interested in improvisation. So my approach is very, very holistic. So it's not enough for me to put a piece by Bach and say, okay, play those notes, play the right dynamics. I want to be sure, like many of you spoke about before, I want to be sure that they understand what's happening harmonically in that piece. And how can that work? How can it influence the creative side of what you bring to the table? So if we take the Donna Lee again, they learn that melody, then we break it down and we talk about, oh, look at what he just did on the 5 chord using an augmented sound. Now you're going to be arranging this Calypso piece. Use that approach when you get to 5 chords, that type of thing. So it's very, very holistic. And what we also try to do is not to discriminate musically. So I remember a few years ago, I wanted to program a fugue And I was thinking, all right, I'll program a few by Bach. But then I thought, wait a minute, we're going into this high school, and a lot of these students may not necessarily be familiar with music of Bach. And the year before, I had performed at a university with a steel band, and they actually performed a few, but this was based on Lady Gaga's piece, Bad Romance, if you remember that one. So there was a piano arrangement of that, and the person arranged it as a fugue. And then somebody else arranged it for steel band. And I said, this is gonna be cool. So we got that arrangement. We did that, but then we also added a bit of a twist to it. In the middle of the fugue, the steel band went into a soca groove. Soca is another style of music that comes from Trinidad and Tobago. Very, very rhythmic. It gets you moving right away, you know? So by doing that, the kids could relate to the subject. For the 2 or 3 minutes that we played it, they could follow it in the different voices. We also got them rocking out. So they had not just the cerebral, you know, experience, but also we touched the emotion. And we also taught them a lot about the history of this instrument, as Jose was talking about, really understanding not just the music, but the history of it. Because this is not a novelty. It's a very, very serious instrument that people literally bled and died for, you know. And so in that 10 minutes or so, they gained so much, you know. And so I like to think about myself and our band as nosy musical neighbors. We're up in everybody's business. So you name it, we try to play it. Whether it's Irish music, classical music, you name it, we're gonna do
it. Thanks, Liam. That's so great.
Can you play some more? I think we're all digging it.
I know. Man, that was bringing me back. We need to get some gigs.
You need to come visit New Orleans sometime soon, man.
Yeah.
I would love to. I've only actually been there one time, so I'll have my people call your people. Let me just get
we will.
So, Liam, have you seen any successful steel pan programs, middle school, high school, college level? Like, you know, can you maybe give us a sense of how maybe one might, like, if you were tasked with building something like that, or if you know of anybody that has, just give me a few steps that somebody might take if they were interested in doing something like that. Do you think you have some thoughts on that?
Maybe just a few thoughts, because the thing with me is I didn't actually start this program, as you mentioned earlier on, so I sort of inherited it. But I have seen many, many successful programs, whether it's at the elementary, middle school, high school, or collegiate level. And I think one of the things that makes it so attractive to folks is that, so I used to play the violin many moons ago, right? And I still remember what an arduous task that was, just trying to get a nice tone out of one of the strings. It took several months, for me at least, you know, I'm sort of a slow learner. But with the steel pan, it's very, very intuitive. And so I can teach practically anybody a simple piece in a matter of minutes. So whether it's, right? They basically just need to know where the notes are located. They don't need to have any sort of refined technique. And what we do as well, we put a Calypso groove behind that. So we get them rocking out and they catch the bug right away, you know? So that's one of the things that's so attractive about this instrument, the instant gratification that people receive. And again, I think because it's so versatile, you're able to play so many different styles of music on it. That's very, very attractive to administrations, you know? And I remember growing up in Trinidad, and in the steel bands that I played in, you had people from all walks of life. And I'm not even exaggerating here. You would have politicians playing in the steel band. And right next to that politician, you might have a doctor. You might have somebody that actually was a former criminal. I'm being totally serious, you know? But we all came together, we learned from each other, and we learned about life, not just about music. How to give, how to take, because we love poking fun at each other sometimes, and you have to learn how to give that back, you know? And these are all life lessons that have helped me, you know, once I moved to the US. So those are some of the things that I would recommend. And the other thing that we do at NIU, because I'm very, very focused on breaking down boundaries musically and otherwise, is I'll actually contact some of my colleagues to either perform with us. So we've performed the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, we've done operatic arias, you name it, we do it. Or some of my colleagues to conduct the steel band. And like Mark and Jose mentioned, there are times when we'd actually have students contribute arrangements and or conduct the ensemble, you know, because it's not just about me, it's not just about the instrument, but it's about educating students and bringing to the fore something that's very important. What happens once you graduate? Many times we wait too long to speak about the business of music, or what do you do to get a performance, to secure performances? What is it like to be a professional? You know, so from the get-go, we try to instill those values into students.
I have a question, because I've been looking at steel pans for a while to try and get that involved, just because I think it's so cool. Where do you, if you want to buy, and I'm actually going to open this question up to Mark and Jose as well. If you wanted to start a steel pan or an Irish music or a Latin group, what kind of things would you need as a band director to have in place as far as instruments, or what would you need to start with, just the basic beginning to make this happen at your school? What kind of things would you need to get?
Well, I think in the USA, there are a number of steel pan builders and tuners now. And so you can find many of them online. I think if you wanted to start a basic band, you would of course want to have the main four voices, your soprano, tenor, alto, and bass. But it's much easier now compared to yesteryear in terms of sourcing instruments, sourcing folks that can tune the instruments, because unlike a violin, again, you know, there are no pegs here to be turned. So you really need to bring in an expert to be able to tune the instruments.
Okay. What about Mark? Someone asked a question of what would you do to start an Irish music band? We have a club called O'Flaherty's down in New Orleans in the Quarter. That there's a guy that plays a lot of guitar and stuff like that and sings a lot of Irish tunes, but it's not necessarily an Irish ensemble. So what kind of things would a teacher want to look for to get one of those started?
Well, Irish music from an instrumentation standpoint is very cheap and easy. You know, there are really two halves to the tradition, one being the vocal tradition and the other being the instrumental dance music tradition. As far as the instrumental dance music tradition, it's you know, fiddles, guitars, flutes, penny whistles, which don't cost a penny anymore, but you know, you can get a decent one for $25. You know, all these instruments are pretty cheap. Funny thing happened with my program is, you know, Jose talked a lot about you know, engaging with musicians in the community, and I didn't, but we've done a lot of that. We've had so many instruments donated to, so many Irish instruments donated to the school that I think we could give an instrument out to every kid in the school. You know, just because there's, you know, old Grandpappy's accordion, you know, here, we don't want it sitting on a shelf, you take it. And once you have, you know, you know, it doesn't even matter what kind of music it is. If you're doing a rock band, you know, you have people in the community who just have old electric guitars sitting around who will want to donate them. No, you know, steel pan music started on inexpensive instruments. You know, Latin music started on inexpensive music, on inexpensive instruments. We have these ideas that, oh, we've got to pay this amount of money for a great instrument, but you know, it can just be scraping a pencil on a soup can.
I'm asking this for several reasons. Number one, because some people think, okay, what would I need to get so I can go get it? And some people would need to hear that it's not going to break your budget to make it happen. That's because they're like, oh, well, we can't afford it, so we won't do it. and that's such an important statement, Mark. People need to know. You got to start somewhere. Just go for it and start.
And we're gonna wrap it up here pretty quickly. But Jarrett Scheel, the ceiling in his kitchen fell in tonight, so he wasn't able to join us. I'm sure we can all understand.
Yeah.
Been there, done that on some level. But Jarrett, my friend Jarrett Scheel, who teaches at Berkeley, and he was an NIU student as well. The story I remember, and this is on my podcast that I did with him, so I may be kind of missing some of the details, but if I stretch a little bit on it, it's going to make for a good story. But basically, he went to New York City. He was going to get a doctorate or a master's degree or something there in New York City, but he needed a job. He got a public school band directing job. Starts the job in August or September. They say we can't get you any instruments until December. And he's like, well, what am I going to do? This is band. And somehow there's some old, turntables, DJ equipment, computers and stuff laying around, enough for him to start teaching people how to make tracks and to build tracks and to use, some other, some building a track similar to another hip hop tune or using a bass line or something like that from other tracks. And all of a sudden he had been thinking about hip hop music education for years, but necessity is the mother of invention. And it was time for him to go with what he had. And so I think, Jose and I taught the percussion instruments that we had at the School of the Arts were not exactly state of the art, and our school was urban and, it's kind of, there were some challenges there, and you just make it happen, and so I guess just my wrap up on all of this, and we could go in many other directions, but I knew that, we could easily go well beyond an hour. And I told Brett, we're going to be done by 7:30, I promise. So my wrap up, and I appreciate everyone's time as well. My wrap up on this is the idea, and I think this comes from the discussion we've had, that I think as a teacher, it's important that we continue our growth. And maybe that doesn't always look like the professional development courses that we go to. I think
definitely doesn't look like any of that.
Okay. The growth can come in many different ways. And if you're enthusiastic about something, the students are going to respond to that enthusiasm. I know Jose, I know Liam, and I watched Mark's discussion about hearing that CD and that light bulb that set off. And I can picture him, if he's anything like me, going into school the next morning saying, guys, we're just going to listen to this today. This music really has done something for me. I need to share it with you. And I think all of us, you can hear how passionate Liam is about, he's been like this since I met him in 1999. He has not become any less enthusiastic about what he's doing and what he's teaching and the way he's sharing his instrument. So this could be chamber groups. If you're really excited about, saxophone quartets, make it happen at your school. Whatever it is, bring that enthusiasm to the students. Also have the humility to learn and try with the students. And I think all of us have done what we've done to a level that's high enough that our students respected us as musicians, so that when it was time for us to say, oh, I actually don't know that, I actually am not an expert on bata drumming, but we're going to learn this together. And that I'm a good musician and I can kick your butt in whatever our regular traditional genre is. So now we can do this together, and we are students and learners and teachers at the same time. And this is what prevents the burnout. This is what keeps us going. this, I've been taking some lessons this summer with Tony Malaby and just getting my butt whooped 6 ways from Sunday. And when I go in to teach my lessons, I have new ways of thinking about things and moving things through for these students. And that's one, I said we'll look for some themes. And I would hope that listeners can track some other themes that we may have missed that stand out to them as they listen to this. I am so thankful for Brett. I'm so thankful for Lee. I'm so thankful that I moved to new places and people trust me and I develop great friendships, and I'm thankful for that. I think all of our panelists here represent places I've moved and good, deep friendships that I've made in this musical world. And I'm thankful for the lessons that I've learned from these guys that influence me every day. And so I want to thank you for taking an hour and a half out of your summer schedules to make a place for us down here in Louisiana. And I'm going to make a plug that I think every teacher who watches this should think about bringing all 3 of these gentlemen to your school sometime soon to see if we can get some things going here. So I think I'll wrap it up with that, unless anybody else has anything they want to chime in on. And I love all of you guys. Yeah, Liam, you unmuted.
I just wanted to say thank you once more. And
okay, thank
nice
you.
meeting everybody. All the best to you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Me too. Thank you for, putting this together. We can go forever, right? We can keep talking because
Right.
this is what we love to do. And Einstein said, if you do what you love, you will never work one day of your life. So this is not working. It's just sharing the beauty of the universe, learning from different, people, and we are basically in the same boat, just trying to make music and learn and share with our students. Our students come through us and they just, hey, can you teach me about this? I don't know about that, but I'm gonna do the research. And man, we wanna go through that process of learning and sharing music. And I think that is so beautiful. So thank you again, Doug, and for putting this together. Beautiful.
Thank you, Doug.
Right.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks so much. Thanks, listeners. Have a great school year.
Thank you.